Chapter 48, Judge Me, Judge Me Not. In the interest of complete and full disclosure, I'm not enamored by political correctness, control freaks, or other forms of personal denial and public bigotry. So when I speak to these issues, I am totally biased. I can't stand control freaks or bigots. They suffer from being weaned too late in life. In the late 60s, when I was in the Delaware State Legislature, I sensed the intolerant numbing of America coming. Everyone I knew thought it was very fashionable and a display of personal prowess and intelligence to insist upon correcting the way other people think and speak. Then they began censoring political opinions of others who disagree with them with insulting and snide personal remarks. When I returned from Africa 6 or 7 years ago, I felt people wiping their political correctness all over me like a smelly, dirty old oil rag, leaving my skin absolutely crawling. It was obvious that political correctness had taken over control of others, and the personal ignorance became a weapon of those with low self-esteem. Political correctness, in the form of official speak and official think, is the first sign of a slippery road to national intolerance and mental numbness, both the first clear sign that the brain drain had taken hold. When I left for Africa, people were listening to opinions on radio and TV talk shows to get their daily fix on the latest word in politics from political hucksters. By the time I returned, these talk shows were considered mandatory for a daily anger fix and became the last word in just about everything. When these regular guests called in, oh my God, they were absolutely awful. They hated everyone for everything. You have got to be especially stupid to buy into political opinions promoted on politically correct control freaks talk shows by political hucksters. Long ago, I became very sensitive to this issue when I was introduced to it in Swakopmund. Their version of political correctness included racial and language groups openly hating each other. It was macho to brag about it in public. The Germans loved hating the Afrikaners. The Afrikaners loved hating them back. Both loved hating the colored and the blacks. And the blacks were against the colored. And the local language used by blacks were all hating each other. If you came from any other country, you could just cut the hatred against you in the air with a knife. And I could never figure out who was on whose side, especially if a job, money, or an opportunity was involved. That part was totally yucky. But I handled it. I kept my big mouth shut, and I tried to like everybody. So in this testy political, sociological climate, this is how we did it. After coffee with Wotan, the first stop for Andrew and I was to visit the very hotel chain that Janita worked for on the Mole to get permission from her boss for her to attend school on Saturday mornings. It was critical we recruited a class with a specific determination to be in the same classroom together 2 days each week in order to force them to speak English. The headman for the hotel chain was a South African. "Och, man, no way, you're CIA." I was amazed but not surprised at his excuse to not approve of free education for his employees, and I immediately went across the mall to a beachfront restaurant. "Ah, no way, man, you're CIA." And so it went over and over and over. I was at times MIA, CIA, absent from my family in Delaware, a mob lawyer in hiding, in the U.S. Witness Protection Program, hell, just about everything. And I was amazed at all the different reasons that they had said that I was in Africa. No one believed I was simply an American volunteer, volunteering to help people with no pay. That idea never occurred to them and was not acceptable in their politically correct control freak consciousness. It was incredibly difficult to convince anyone that one old man with no assets would do things I did within their community for no pay, and especially with no visible means of support and no particular hidden agenda, except to see folks advance their lives and get job opportunities by learning English. And that's the only reason I was there. I spent months soliciting members of the business community up and down the coastal towns about training employees free of charge as future computer workers. Hey, I'm Tommy Little. I'm trying to start a school, etc. Ach, man, are you training blacks? Yes, slam. Hey, I'm Tommy, slam. And so it went up and down the coast. I had many politically correct doors slammed in my face, but finally I got the point across to a few good-hearted souls, and the word spread slowly about a free college education in English being offered on weekends by an American volunteer in Swakopmund. What surprised me most was the determined resistance to the idea of teaching English to blacks by the white establishment. They seemed especially angry that the school was free and therefore available to the general public, and that we would accept anyone who applied, first come, first serve. Before this opportunity came along, anyone wanting advanced education after high school had to go to Windhoek or South Africa, England, Europe, Australia, or America, and rarely did the graduates return. That's why I told you all about the brain drain. Finally, I got my third student. His name was Cooksey, one of my top judo players. He got permission from his employer to go to class every other Saturday, and I agreed to work out a private computer project for him with his employer to type in English and send emails. I had met with Cooksey and his mother secretly at my flat one night, much earlier in the cyber school game. He explained to me, secretly and confidentially, that he had available $6 million American dollars in black money in a bag. The U.S. sends big amounts of cash money to third world countries that is coated black and requires a special chemical to unblack it. He wanted to sell it to me, and I howled. It's the second oldest Nigerian scam in the world, and he fell for it. I didn't want to break his bubble, and I told him that he could bury it under the braai, that's a fire pit, surrounded by stone, in my backyard for safekeeping if he wanted to. That was my way of getting money out of circulation. I forgot about it, but I had him by the short hairs, and he finally became a student. He led me to the fourth student, and so it went until I recruited a total of 44, knowing that half of them would not show up on opening day. I hit that number right on the mark. Opening day, 22 Namibians showed up for class, right in front of the Swakopmund Senior Secondary School, or the 4S as it was called. At 8 a.m. Saturday morning, the crowd of 22 confused languages stood outside the 4S. Andrew panicked because the principal had just refused to give us the key at the last minute. He had promised us we could use the classroom on Saturdays and Sundays. Who ever thought of using a school on weekends? He got serious pressure from the education community as the word got out that we were seriously organized and had gained popular support for our free school. Screw 'em, Andrew. Let's go to my flat down the street. And that's how we got the Saturday morning sessions started. When I moved into the flat after living with Hein had given me a large round table with 8 chairs and a sofa seating 4. They took turns sitting on the floor. The movie theater for Sundays was the second coup, and that was Wotan's brilliant idea. I used Danny DeVito's movie, The Renaissance Man, as the first presentation to show how American military slow learners learned English by practicing Shakespeare. The Last of the Mohegans was my next preference in order to show them, to break the popular third world myth that cowboys and Indians were running America. And that is true, that's what they thought. I recruited old friends from Delaware to send me a steady stream of random thought emails. Ted Cadell was the first one on the team, as were many prominent lawyers and teachers that I knew in Delaware. A former magistrate turned corporate lawyer was traveling to Dubai regularly, and he visited us 3 times in Swakopmund for 10 days each. He was our first cyber teacher. We used the Thomas Capano murder trial as the motivational juice necessary to keep the students interested in law and legal issues. Ted Cadell and Larry Nagergas from the Philly newspaper sent their daily professionally filed news stories to me at the end of the trial each day, and the class printed them out and memorized the names of all the lawyers, all the players, and their part in the story. I had them play different parts in the different roles in a mock trial in English, and they were invested in the characters, and they had their favorites. Tom Capano was certainly not one of them. My Africans knew every bit of the testimony presented in the trial as reported by the two reporters. We had help understanding the case from a retired judge turned corporate executive named Josh Martin. He helped us as our school's legal advisor, commenting occasionally by email on evidence introduced, procedural issues, and the lawyer's antics in the trial. It was the best teaching experience I ever had, and I really miss it. The day that the Capano jury was out, and everybody was guessing what was going to happen, all 22 of my students acted as a jury, and they acquitted him, based on the testimony of the lady who was involved in the case. But they acquitted him. That blew my mind. Thank you.